Um, all right. Yeah, let's get started. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you here. And thank you all for being here for our 13th Tagion Townhall session. My name is Jonas, and I will be your host for today. As most of you probably already know, we usually do a town hall session once per month, and it's a great opportunity for us to come together, share updates, and ask and answer questions. Yeah, and today, and as always, we have put together a small agenda. So I'll just quickly do a rundown. So let me just share my screen with you. All right. Do you see it now? Assume so.
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, we will cover recent resource realignments and strategic priorities. We will then hear about the updated tech roadmap. Then we will hear about recent developments in governance, and then finally we'll talk about the recently published draft version of the Tagion Manifesto. And to cover these topics, I have two of the three co-founders of Tagion, Thijs and Carsten, to help me. And then we also have our complementary currency and governance pundit, Lander. So yeah, and just to let you all know, and before we dive into all of this, I want to emphasize that we encourage you to submit questions in the chat as we go along, or if you feel like it, you can join us on stage. We'll be more than happy to have you up here. So yeah, with that being said, Thijs, you are the first man up. So yeah, feel free to tell us a bit about recent realignments and resources and strategic priorities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonas, and happy to be here and happy to see the one of you who showed up here tonight. Can you actually see the full slideshow and share that, Jonas? There is like updates of the timelines, or should I do this myself? I should probably do this.
If we can do it, that would be good.
Okay, I'll do it then. See if I can figure it out. So yes, we have done some resource alignment. I'll just try to speak while I try to share here. I'm not good at multitasking. See if it works out. Yes, it is there. And then if I'm okay, I could probably press plus or something. Then it should be in full screen. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's the wrong one. Perfect. That didn't work. How do I then get out of this?
Yeah, it's tricky.
Okay. Perfect. I'll just keep it here then.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we have had some strategic developments here, which is extremely positive. We have more, you could say, commercial partners and interests in the project, which we are working with currently. We still have AN. We also have others now. And that have led us to more and more requirements led by business. And in order for them to interact with the system, they, of course, need a way to get, you could say, the data in and out of the system, and also a way to execute transactions, or you could say signing of documents, like using the system basically, and also being able themselves to develop those, you could say, application functions. So we have chosen to prioritize a bit different. That's why we have put data contracts and TVM up in priority. It was actually not our priority for this year. We said we will do it after the main infrastructure was done. But as we also realized, it was extremely cumbersome for now 2 partners and projects working on the system without them being able to work without basically developing, you could say, functionality directly in the core code or with help from us. So we moved this up, and that's actually why we did this, and also why we have now postponed some other deadlines. So that's basically one of the main reasons why we did this, and it also means internally here we have also focused quite hard on supporting new projects and commercial developments ourselves, and we're still doing that to drive the first adoption cases of the platform. Especially also Jonas and Lander is helping with this. And Christian for that matter. So we are focusing quite hard on getting more cases and the first adoptions on the platform. So that's the main strategic reason for this. As we have also said many times here, like utility is the most important thing you can get on a system, because that will also itself create demand, of course, for the tokens. Because the whole token model is built on utility, you pay for the use of the system. The more utility, the more demand you also have for your tokens. So that's why we have chosen this approach, and also why we didn't choose to directly go to an exchange. We want to have the first demand present, and that has been the main priority all the time. Yeah, that's a little bit about why we have done this from a strategic point of view. So that's why. So it's basically been driven by business demands now. So we have reprioritized. Yeah. And also those, you could say, requirements, you could argue somehow is a bit conflicting with going on an exchange, because there is some. We have been speaking to different exchanges, and there is some requirements you need to fulfill. You need to be somehow decentralized, and you also need to, you can say, being eligible, having the first amount, but also having tokenomics and governance in place. There needs to be some minimum in place. And the decentralization part has been, you could say, prioritized as second now compared to supporting the first business in applications on the platform. But again, we also need demand anyway, so it's just to say how it works. Yeah, I don't know if that was more or less what I should tell about the strategic prioritization of resources. Jonas, is there anything more I should clarify, or do you have questions or others? Can you hear me?
I think it's good. I think it's primarily about giving the background and simply just making people aware of this reprioritization and realignment of resources. So yeah, I think that's more than sufficient. All right. So also in line of that, we have updated our tech roadmap, and that's where Carsten then comes in. So Carsten, maybe you could give us a little update on what's going on in the tech side of things.
Yeah, as Ty said, we reprioritized. So this means that also we had to, when you reprioritize, you also have to. There's a lot of work we have to do differently. So we also improved the way we actually test the system. So we have did a lot on the testing system, which is not shown on this graph because it's not a product directly. But even it takes a lot of time. And we are now working very hard on the TVM because the customer needs. The problem is if you don't have a flexible interface, it's very difficult for the customer to work with, because you have to have deep knowledge on the system. So you actually have to to program a lot by yourself. And we until now, the customer we have done this internally in cooperation with the customer. But because we are getting more requests for customers, also they wanted to have a tool where they could see what they can do. And if you have to dig into the engine of the system to actually find out what you can do, it's not very convenient, and it's also not very sellable. So we also prioritize this for also for both for us internally in the development, because we would have to do everything if we can't help the customer, but also as a sales tool, it's very important that you have something where the customer can actually build the first prototype on. So we are prioritizing those kind of things. So we believe that we have actually the plan is that we have the first prototype end this year, because we have reprioritized some of the other stuff. So that's what we're working on. So
Yeah, and I actually think,
That makes-
Carsten, also like you did a lot work on, even though it was actually first year after summer we did this reprioritization. So you actually did some big milestones as well on the new consensus algorithm and bug. And maybe you can tell a bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. We had actually we had several small startup problems, but one of the biggest one was the consensus problem we had when one node was was delayed for a longer period of time. It didn't reach consensus. So we have worked. It took maybe I probably think 4 or 5 months to solve this problem, and we solved this 1.5 months ago. So this actually also significantly win, which you can't really show in this scheme, but it's internally for us in the development, it was a big success that we solved this problem. Because in principle, you can say if we didn't solve the problem, then we have a big problem. So yeah, so that was a big success actually. So yeah. Yeah, because we had the problem that sometimes the one node or several nodes didn't reach the same conclusion, and this is the whole idea of the system. So
yeah, so you could say you call it a big problem. This is what you call a breaking problem. Then the system basically doesn't work right.
It was a breaking. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it was also the bug we had from when we went live in late December, right? Where this problem first emerged like after 2 months. It was like very seldom. It was like 100,000 epochs or something where it could happen.
And this is due to that now we're running all the nodes ourselves. So the communication between the nodes is the latency is very low. But in a real network, you have very different latencies. So this problem would occur much oftener if we actually proved this by so we built up some tests where we could prove that this would occur even more often, like within 50 or even 20 epochs or something. So if you had so it was a severe problem. So which we worked on pretty hard for 4 months.
So
Nice.
so maybe to wrap this up, we could say that for looking backwards, we have spent time fixing some stuff in the network, and then looking forward, we'll allocate resources for making the network ready for external parties to develop, test on the network, so it becomes easier for us to meet client demand, onboard new customers, and that this doesn't mean that we don't prioritize decentralizing the network. It's simply just a reflection of the fact that we don't have 100 people working on the network, and there are a limited amount of resources, so we need to prioritize. And right now, we simply just choose to satisfy customers with the intention of getting them all onboarded, creating demand for the TTN token, and then start decentralizing the network.
And
Is
just to
that
mention
a
on this,
correct?
we have actually, yeah, exactly. And just to mention this, we have actually done a lot of tests on decentralization of the network. So it's not that we haven't worked on it, but it's not because if we are decentralizing the network, we have to run tons of more tests, because when the network is public, then it's much more vulnerable. So it's not that we have a lot of work which we have done on this. So actually, it's just that we would we reprioritize the sellability of the project right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and in respect to what you said there, I also guess it's really important to emphasize that it does mean a lot to have a good infrastructure from the get-go, not one with a lot of bugs and which cannot be fixed. I think if you look at something like Ethereum, I guess they have a lot of problems right now, actually implementing new updates to make it viable in a more modern context. So I guess in that sense, I guess it's just about prioritizing making a good product from the start, and which we then know is geared for the future. In
Yeah.
a sense.
Yeah, it's you have a saying as an engineer, it's very difficult to change the engine in the flight. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Exactly.
and just to
that's
show
very
exactly. So if we show the engine here, you could say we took a little bit more boring approach. Many projects actually start creating the interface and the you could say TVM, or the virtual machine, and the contract language, because that's where other developers and projects can work on, because that's how you can get quick adoption or hype, so to speak. But on the other hand, it doesn't solve your infrastructure problem, which is basically consensus and your database, the distributed database. And if that's not fixed, that is the hard problem to solve. Then you cannot scale and make it work. It doesn't matter. It's just another tool that cannot be worked in or used in real life. And if you look at
it's
this, like
very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult to fix afterwards.
yeah,
It's
close
very
to
difficult.
impossible, right?
Yeah.
So you can say if you look at it from a conceptual point of view or system, we have something called an orchestrator or a relay station or whatever you call it. We call it a shell. It's like a user interface where we relay all the user messages to the kernel, and it has some caching functions. That works, that's fine. Then you have an execution pipeline up here. Currently, you can only use hard-coded functions. You can still fetch data from the database, execute contracts and so forth, but it's all hard-coded functions. I mean, you need to code it in D, it needs to be a part of the system. And that's not very flexible, of course, and means you need to be a core developer basically to develop anything, because the TVM part in the middle here, we basically have not developed. We basically prioritized this out because we thought it was more important to get the epoch, the consensus mechanism to work here, and together with the database. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yeah.
And that's also what we call the infrastructure of the system. Because if the consensus and the database is not working, then the rest doesn't matter basically, because it's never going to scale and work in real life. So that's where we started. And you could say from a marketing point of view, and maybe also from a more like from DLT Web3 point of view, you often just start with creating some kind of tool that can work here, but then it's not decentralized and it cannot scale basically. Then they try to fix the infrastructure afterwards. Yeah, to be like a bit more, give a little bit more context. Now I'll stop. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. Technical, but good. All right. I don't know if anyone has any questions. You're welcome on stage, or you can post them in the chat. We can also return to this later if there is anything. But I think otherwise, for now, let's move on to governance. Where
I would actually have a question before we move on to governance. Is that
okay?
all right?
Good. Good. Yeah.
To make the bridge from one topic to the other, and maybe there are other people in the audience or watching later on YouTube that haven't followed all the town halls and all the roadmaps. So could Thijs or Carsten, could you quickly speak to the elements that have been postponed, the ones that we introduced in the other roadmap, just to highlight? If somebody remembers, oh, didn't they say this and this will happen? And then just say, well, this is the parts that now get delayed.
What we have postponed is the public note. The public note was actually it was targeted for November this month actually, and then we because of our excellent sales team, they had a lot of opportunities, and then then I was thinking, and we were thinking in the development team, if we have to prepare for the projects coming in, we have to prioritize this, because or else it would hit us in the back, because we can't. We need to have a tool for them to work on, or else we need to do it all ourselves. So that's why I proposed to postpone the because we actually had a lot of components there. We didn't have all the tests in place, all the test frameworks, but we actually have a lot of stuff working for the distribution, because we already made this in August or October or something. So September actually. And I was proposing that we work on this instead, so we have something, so we are not flattened out in the development team when the customer needs something. So I think that's my that's my
and that's the public node release that has been postponed, Leander, basically, and also the Mode 2 operated network, which we have postponed now because, I guess that's what your question, right?
Yes, exactly. And they were on the timeline up there, but just to highlight it and speak to it as well, so people don't miss it later when they just look through it quickly.
And actually, I just posted a link as well, and I'll just share maybe this in the chat, because also making it easier for customers to, or basically developers to work on the system. We published, I know it was presented last time, but now it's actually also as a public package on pop.dev for web, iOS, and Android, where there is like a way to basically easily develop with the endpoints on the system. Yeah. So if anybody of you wants to develop, you can take it down tonight and play with it.
That's one thing which we have prioritized. We have prioritized a lot of stuff for the customer, exactly.
Yeah.
Great.
And just to mention, in case again, this public node and the Mode 2 doesn't mean much to people who are watching, and we never know who's in the audience and how savvy they are. But of course, the code has been released, and very technical people, I tried myself but failed. But if I knew more, I could, of course, run these nodes and test the software and audit it. But what is missing is actually a packaging of that, so that less savvy people can actually participate, run the nodes, see what's going on in the main net, and eventually also run a node. So these easier ways to access the to participate have been postponed. And what you just showed, Thijs, also what has been prioritized is for, again, savvy people who are actually developing products on it. They now have better tools available to quicker start using the system and build on it. But for conventional users and lay people wanting to run a node, that will wait a little longer until next year.
Leander, if you want to try, then I will help.
Thank you. Yeah, but so if I sit next to you, that would be great. But this is the level that we can't really expect from most people.
Yeah, and I'm just showing the different modes, and you could say the mode 1 actually was accomplished. I think it was late August. We have a test system for mode 1. Yeah, and we still have a few upgrades to do there on IPsec and so forth, but more or less this is pretty far. And then we would like to go up to mode 2. Mode 2 would mean a node can fall out and still catch up and be included or excluded in the network, basically, without crashing the network. That was actually the goal for this year. As Carsten said, a lot of the work has actually been done, but we haven't tested it well enough to actually go live with it. And then there is the last 2 modes. Mode 4 is not really like a mode as such. It's more like you can run a sub ecosystem. Anyways, and the last one would be mode 3. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the perfect segue now for me to take over and talk about governance, because these terms is something we do refer in the governance.
Exactly. Because this is like the technical network modes. What happens here from mode 3 was the node swapping, where you could say you secure the SIP vector in the system. From here on, it will be like governance or social, you could say, rules that decides on the system, basically. From here on, here stops the technical part of it. And I'm trying to stop the presentation now, and yeah, here it is.
Great. So I'll just start sharing from my end. Tell me if you, well, I see it myself, so that works. So, and this is exactly where we start referring to the technical development pathway on the governance side and the development of the governance path as well. I'm starting here on the Tagion website. We did mention that in the last town hall that we have revamped it, we have changed it, we have updated the text a little bit also to make it more accessible and explain a few things better and more consistently. So I'm just starting here, and I need to switch browser. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing now, but I'm navigating it. But I hope you see that I'm clicking on code and documentation now on the Tagion website, which then takes me to our documentation page, docs.tagion.org. And this is, I think, something we showed you last time already, or maybe it's just been published elsewhere. But as you can see, there are now those 2 dimensions to our network development. There's the tech documentation for the technical development, and there's the governance documentation for that part that we're going to talk about now. I'm clicking on this, and you'll see an introduction, which some of you might have seen already because it's been out for a while. But if you click around and poke through it, you'll see there's a lot of underdeveloped pages, and that is because we are in the process of developing this. And as Jonas introduced at the beginning, there will be the manifesto that we talk about at the end of this call. And this is the first part that actually has been published. But I'm just going to take you actually through this introduction, not reading it out aloud, but just telling you what we say there, because this is actually the story we also want everybody to understand when they wonder about governance. And this is exactly why I asked these questions, because we do have to refer to the technical development path here as well. So once we define what governance speaks about, and you can read up on this later by yourself, it's, I hope for everybody obvious, that it's about the rule setting and the structure that a network runs by. But if we say it is a decentralization network, this website also tells you, well, this is our ambition, but currently you couldn't call it a decentralized network yet. There are several nodes, so it's distributed, but they're all still on our server in Liechtenstein. And this is what mode 1 implies. Now, this we now call the pre-release phase. And once you can actually have nodes on different servers and we get into mode 2, or you can have them already, but it would be a lot of work. So once that is easier for everybody to implement, then we get into mode 2, and then we start the release phase of the Tagion network. And with these phases, the governance structure needs to evolve as well. So closed release, we call that first phase, that's starting with mode 2, where nodes can be run on the system, but there is still a level of safety that we will guarantee by controlling clearly who runs a node, where they are, because they might need support. We need to monitor it closely. The test we run will be in a safe environment, so to say. So in the closed release, we will distribute it further out and have nodes running on different servers, and potentially people can apply. And we say, yeah, well, if you know what you're doing, we can have a close relationship with you and we can work together on this. and of course other people and institutions and our clients as well, who we work with directly, can run nodes out of our own servers. Limited release will be the moment when we have established governance rules that make it possible for people to join by themselves, but there are still a lot of rules and conditions that apply, and we need to keep close tabs on who's joining and how that works, also in case there are bugs, that we can easier solve them and evolve the whole system further. And we get to curated release, where basically all the rules are established. This is the wider testing stage where people following those rules can onboard, run a node, become a passive node, then come into the pool of active nodes. And this is where mode 3, as Thijs explained, will be important. And once that is all established and works, and the governance structure is sound, and we have tested it, and we had attacks and fended them off, and we realized, no, this is robust and wouldn't fall prey to any malicious intents, then there will be this point that we call singularity, because from then on, all previous laws don't apply anymore, because that's the point where the network will be totally decentralized, out of our hands and in the open, and the community will basically have taken over. Of course, we are part of the community too, and we'll do our part and we'll keep contributing, but from then on, the stewardship that we currently hold over the network will have phased itself out, and the decentralization is established. I'm just scrolling back up for you to eventually come to this page and read up on this yourself. You will see on the left-hand side, if you see my cursor, there is the manifesto. I'm just clicking on it to show you it's not there yet. We have released it to you only on Discord as a community pre-release to gather some feedback, and there are some changes that we will implement after this feedback before we now release it into the wild on this website for everybody to see and follow, and we'll hear more about the content later. And then we have also structured it already in terms of governance areas that we will just use as a pattern for you to read up and contribute to different areas of governance, so that it's not just one big document with a very complicated structure, but we'll split it out into decision making, into network formation. These are all the rules that fend off Sybil attacks, basically how you become a node, how you can become a passive node, how you become an active node, who's running the system, so to say. Token economics is another element that, of course, is, as everything else, interdependent with all the other areas, but it is of a particular kind. It's where the TGN tokens are defined and the rules around that, issuance, volume, everything relating to this. And then software development, of course, once this network is out of our stewardship, software needs to be maintained, needs to be monitored, needs to be upgraded. Who's to decide, who's doing the work, when is what happening? That's what in this governance area will be described. And just to close it off, there's a glossary for all these technical and jargon terms. We will just say what they mean in the general sense, what they mean in the narrower sense, what they mean to us. And if it's something we included into the governance structure, we'll say why. And if we haven't, we say, well, we don't think that's a good idea to include. So this will be the website for you all to follow our governance development and also to contribute. You might recognize these are pages that are basically fed from repositories on GitHub. So if you know how to work with that, you could suggest changes there directly for us to see and edit, or you just ping us on Discord and say what you write there. I have an opinion on this. Couldn't it be this? What do you mean? Can't we change this? And eventually, of course, there will be a wider community engagement process where these kinds of conversations is what we want to happen, because we don't want to determine all that ourselves. You might have seen on the roadmap that Thijs showed earlier that there is also a community event scheduled. We had wanted to do this earlier along with the technical development, but now it makes sense to have that next year when there is more to discuss, when the government's in step with the technical development has been developed, and we also have more concrete interest of people who say, I do want to feed into this. This is really dear to me. Also clients who might say, we're running a node on this, we're relying on this. Of course, we want to have some input into this or better understand what's going on so we can use it more coherently and more efficiently. Then we're going to have this event sometime next year to bring this all together. There are a few more terms we introduced. You might have seen that on the roadmap as well. When we say Tong, don't look it up. It means something else out in the world. But we mean the open notebook on governance, the Tagion Open Notebook on Governance, TONG. And this is basically what you just saw. This website will be our open notebook where all the thinking, all the development, all the definitions will be published there for you to see and to feed in. We're not keeping that behind closed doors and then dumping a ready-made governance paper on you, but it's work in progress under your critical eyes. And the other one was the working paper. This will then be the version of the governance ready for Mode 2, ready for the curated release. The first version of we say, okay, let's try this out. Run your nodes by these rules. And if it works, we know we're on a good way to decentralization and we can move towards singularity. So that was a lot of words. Maybe before moving on to the last part, are there any questions to this? And just as a reminder, if you have questions to us,
come with a comment.
Let me just orientate people. The last part will be this manifesto, which Thijs is going to introduce, which is the first solid point that we are in the process of publishing and setting into stone. And we'll get to this in a minute, so hold your questions on that. But Carsten, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that the repository for the governance is actually the same as the source because they are complementary systems. So it's in the same repository, so they move along in the same repository. So it's so we are committing it in the same system. Just to mention,
which is actually great. It's a little bit superficial. It could be somewhere else too, but this is a nice illustration how those two things work together and how the coherence we want for governance and technical development actually is implemented even in the way we're managing our code.
Exactly. Exactly.
And of course, I mean, also just to say that, of course, some governance rules will have very concrete demands on the technical development. Some things will have to be hard-coded, so to say, or actually being enabled in the code for us to then operate these rules by voting mechanisms, all these things that there will be communication between us at the business development and governance team and the technical team saying, is this actually possible what we envision? And if not, could you please? All right, so we really encourage, even at this stage, if there are any elements where you say, this is weird, why do you do this? Speak up, tell us later on the channels that you have at your disposal. But if there's no question about the overall roadmap and path for this, I'll hand to Thijs to tell you what these elements are that we have now set in stone as the guiding principles for this whole process. And yes, it's a bit verbose and grandiose, but we have called it the manifesto because this is our declaration of future decentralization. So
exactly.
Thijs, take it away.
I cannot share. Can you stop sharing, Lander? Thank you.
I'll stop.
Because I think I can press it as well. Yes. We are actually getting pretty good at this, if I should say it myself. Can I then share here again? Yeah. So first of all, you could say it's good to get written down your actual intention, so you can also remember it yourself, but also everybody else can actually see what you mean in a month or two. And this has been actually, for me, and also I hope for the people involved at least, I'm extremely grateful that we did this work, and also especially Lander and Jonas have helped a lot formulate this in a meaningful way. But the intention from where we started off has not changed of the whole Tagion system. In a simple way of saying it is basically like, we need to decide on how we cater for different interests. Do we need a few players that could be governments or big institutions, like banks, or like very big corporations? Should they be able to control, you could say, public infrastructure, which is basically a monetary system, or would we like it to be more cater for the broader public interest? And we said we would like to see if we can actually create a system that tries to cater for the more broader interest of people, and not only the few, and thereby also decentralization. And that's, you could say, that's also what Bitcoin tried, what many others have tried, but it's actually pretty difficult to make work. One thing is the decentralization part, where we make the decisions. The other part is the technical part, and both of them are extremely, you could say, complicated. It's basically both of them are a new, you could say, in invention that needs to be tested in society as well. So we want to create this alternative to the current system and deliver this infrastructure. And now I cannot see anything anymore. I don't know what happened. Can you still see the screen?
Yeah, we see
you're
your
on
screen.
motivation.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's in a nutshell what we are trying to do. Not because we don't like, you could say, banks or governments and so forth, or want to say, oh, you're doing everything wrong. We just want to say, let's try to do it in an alternative way. Let's see if we can build something from the ground up and make it work in an alternative way, and actually bring stronger economies out of this, which is open for everybody to participate in. So that's what we're trying to do. And it was started in like 6.5 years ago by Carsten and Christian and me in Denmark. A mad idea. You could say when we started out, of course, some of the other projects have tried as well, but we said we can also do this. How hard can it be? And now we're actually at a point where we need to define what we mean about decentralization, what we mean about privacy. So what it actually means for us now, but also hopefully in the future, or what it should mean in the future, at least from our point of view, when we let go of the stewardship of the Tagion system, when it becomes decentralized, or you could say the community becomes the stewards of the system. So we created some guiding principle. First thing is decentralization. And that's like opposite of centralization, but we believe that it's good that the decision making is distributed out to the different community members based on different roles, of course, but it's good we distribute out the decision making so we can cater for the interests of the many. That's the most important part. Also, so no single entity like get too much power basically, so they can take decisions themselves. And that's basically back, if you want to participate in the governance work, that's a lot of work is going to take place in this. But this is like one of the main, you could say, values which we have. Then we believe in inclusivity. Like everybody, no matter where they are, who they are, and what is their, you could say, status, so to speak, then they should be allowed to participate, and everybody should have the same rights to participate in the system. That's why we say it's for everyone, everywhere. Then we have something called equality of opportunity. How should I say this? Maybe I should compare it to some of the other systems like proof of work, proof of stake, or you could say just systems that are based on economics of scale, basically. The more capital you have, or the more power you will gain in a system. And we think this is a bad idea when you have a public system. So no matter what, and no matter how much capital you have in this system, everybody should still have the same opportunity to help basically make decisions in the system, contribute and benefit from the system. So you should not have special privileges just because you have, you could say, many Tagion tokens or many, you could say, nodes or whatever. and everybody has the same possibility to contribute on all levels in the system. That could be like developing the core code, running a node, being a promoter of the system, just being a user. It should be equal. Then it should be autonomous, you could say. The Tagion system, both from an operational point of view, should not be dependent on one single actor running the system. Like Descartes is right now running the server. That's a pretty bad way of doing it. It goes directly against this point. That's also why we're saying this is where we start, but we will go away from this, because it should never be dependent on, you could say, other single entities or persons for that matter. We also think people who want, or organization that wants to use this infrastructure, should have the freedom to operate with their own set of rules, within their own autonomy, basically in their own federated sub-ecosystems. That's another way, also independent of, you could say, the mainnet, but also other external parties. Then we have privacy. I would say that's a given. It was, at least in DLT, for some years. So both people and businesses should have the privacy, both data ownership, but also in terms of having, if I do a transaction, nobody should be able to see who I'm actually sending to, how much funds do I have myself. We expect people to have privacy and own their own data. Transparency, in Danish you would probably say, what you cannot explain, you cannot defend. That's like a Danish way of saying it. Why would you hide anything? And we think that's a good thing, is especially with public infrastructure. So like the source code, it could also be how many tokens do we have in the system. Those things that are extremely important for everybody using the system as a whole, all those things should of course be fully transparent and public information, not encrypted. Transparency, we believe that's extremely important. Also, for example, so I cannot, if I use the system, it's very clear to me, I can go in and see how many tokens is there actually in the system. How is the tokens actually minted or burned, for that matter? What is the prices for using the system, or for how do we reward nodes? All these things should be fully transparent for everyone. Sustainability. Again, it's also back to autonomy. If you want to have something that is sustainable, it should basically, you can say, be able to finance and operate itself. That's extremely important. So Tagion, this system as a whole, cannot externalize cost or externalize funding to other parties, because then we'll also get other interests, so to speak. It should strive always to be innovating itself and developing the system as a whole with all its actors involved, so it keeps staying true to those values and keep, you could say, developing to the user needs as well in the system. So so it actually is still relevant in the future. And then we think Tagion, or the Tagion community, shall always try to uphold those principles here. That's the main points. I don't know if there is any questions to this.
I think maybe just to add one thing on the privacy part, because it also, I kind of remember who commented on this in the general chat, but to a certain extent, privacy is at odds with regulations. So you do see some networks like Monero who really has prioritized privacy being outlawed to a certain extent. They're not being it's for a lot of the big exchanges, don't want to trade Monero because the level of privacy is so high. So it becomes a an infrastructure used for terrorist financing or whitewashing, stuff like that. But the approach, or the way we see it, is to keep the infrastructure layer itself, give them some embedded with some privacy enhancing tools, but still give crypto asset service providers, as they're called in strictly legal terms, give them the opportunity to still adhere to regulations by giving them the tools to or at least giving the users giving them the ability to actually share relevant data with crypto asset service providers, so they can stay compliant. So at the end of the day, it's about the ownership of data. That at the end of the day, it rests with the user itself, and not with some third party. But yeah. So
that's a
it's
really good
about
point, Jonas. And that's, we also had many discussions internally here, especially you and me, Carsten, like some years ago, when we discussed Monero. Like a good example there, Jonas, with the encryption of transaction, right? Which you have in Monero. So there is no transparency basically. And I would say, you could argue that's a good thing or not. I would say, I think it's better we have transparency on total amount of tokens we have, and everybody can see the values in the system, the data basically on the mainnet at least. But then at the same time, of course, we need to protect those transaction entities, right? So they cannot be revealed in public, their identities. If they want to be compliant, though, they can send and prove they own this data and send it to the relevant authorities, so they can adhere to whatever regulation we have, right? So it's become easy to do, but the system itself implement those value as described here. We don't implement regulation in the system. That's something service providers or users themselves can ensure on top of the system.
Yeah,
and in this way, it's, you could say again, it's also back to autonomy. The system is independent of regulators as well. Regulators cannot decide what should be implemented in the core system. They can, of course, decide what the service provider in a given country should do, but that's another case. It's nothing to do with the core system. That stays autonomous, basically.
Yeah.
If I may come in, there's a little point that we haven't mentioned again yet, but I remember we also discussed it when we came to that point about autonomy, and that is that, of course, when we talk governance and what we just showed you in the roadmap, this refers firstly to the mainnet. And you might have heard us say federated system and subsystems. Of course, you can then set your own rules in your subsystems if you want to amend what we do in the mainnet. But when we talk governance, this all refers to the mainnet of Tagion as the core, and then of course different rules, even more like more compliance and all these things, or less, can be implemented in the subsystem that adheres to its own rules and governance systems.
Yeah.
And this is also why, maybe just to highlight it, you read over it quite quickly. That last sentence in the manifesto says, and these rules should always be adhered to. This is why the manifesto is also the first point of this whole governance adventure, so to say, because now we set the rules and everything else we can always check back. Does it actually support these manifesto principles or not? And no decision that we will take for the mainnet should diverge from this. In your subsystem, at some point, vote for, we called it in the tech development, there you can also say, well, it's full transparency or it's no transparency. It's full, autonomy you can't get away with because you had the autonomy to run a subsystem, but you can then diverge in your subsystem. But as much as you rely on the mainnet, you will always come back to these governance rules and have to work with those.
Yeah. All right. So I think on that note, let's wrap it up. If there is anyone who has any questions, we can easily quickly go through them. But otherwise, I think we are.
And if what I said didn't make any sense whatsoever, you can go in and read it yourself in the governance general chat here on Discord. It's actually public available here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is this governance general. I think everybody has access to this, right?
Yeah.
Everybody who joins our Discord.
Otherwise, there's no.
Yeah. And thanks, Thijs, for bringing this up, because we want you to do that and feedback, because at some point in December, this will go onto the website that I showed you earlier, and from then on, it will be set in stone, and we're not going to change it, because we need to close the lid on this. Otherwise, the immutability of that will not be guaranteed. Of course, if we realize there's complete nonsense at some point, or it makes no sense and conflicts, we can take a community decision. We haven't decided the ratio on that yet, but for now we consider this to be then set in stone and the principle for everything else. So if you want to chime in and read it, do so quickly. We will announce on Discord when the deadline will be from which on the manifesto is written and published properly. For now, it's a pre-publication on Discord.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to add to governance for now? No? All right. And there are no questions in the chat. So I think that's it for today. But yeah, as you also just said, Landa, we really encourage you to engage with us, provide feedback, comments, criticism, all of it. That'd be great. But
Hey, will
yeah,
we have another town hall before Christmas?
Yeah. So that's just what I'm about to to mention. So we have the next town hall session on the 19th of December, and we will do it 4 p.m. CET, so not 8 p.m. as it usually is the case. 4 p.m. I've also created an event here in Discord. But yeah, we hope to see you all there. Until then, stay engaged and yeah, comment or provide questions here in Discord, and we'd be happy to engage with you. That's it. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, you too, guys. Bye.
Bye.